Hello everyone, I'm Wendy Liebmann. I'm the CEO and Chief Shopper at WSL Strategic Retail, and this is Future Shop. Well, it feels like over the last few months, maybe few years, many of us, WSL included, have been spending lots of time, maybe way too much time, research and also brainpower on discovering how younger shoppers, younger generations, especially Gen Z, and even Gen A and our end of the world are going to change brands, retailers, the world. But what struck me recently, maybe as boomer number one, me, is that there's so much untapped commercial potential right at our fingertips at these moments, especially when we think about those who are over 50, over 60, or and even, heaven forbid, over 70. So why are we ignoring them, us, and why and how do we need to stop? Well, my guest today is going to actually unravel all that for us because he's figured it all out. He is Michael Clinton. He's the former president and publishing director of Hearst magazines. He now also serves, they wouldn't let him out of their sight, as special media advisor to the CEO at Hearst. He is also the CEO and founder of an organization he's developed called ROARforward, which was actually based on a best-selling book he wrote in 2021 about how do you roar forward in the second half of your life. He's also built this into a joint venture with Hearst, so lots to tell about that. So clearly Michael has figured out what all the opportunity he is here and how we should move on. So I am delighted to have you with us, Michael. Welcome.
Wendy, thanks so much. It's always great to be with you and see you. Thank you.
Yeah, it feels like we've known each other from when we were maybe our own Gen Zs, maybe not quite, but thereabouts. And
True,
and
true.
long enough, not long enough, never long enough, but that it always made me think that you have this extraordinary lens before the whole raw movement that you're creating, but you've had this extraordinary lens through your media expertise, all the touch points around CPG brands, how to communicate, how to build businesses from a publishing perspective, and marketing in general. You've always been at that sensitive forefront of where the world is heading and how we communicate. And so when you all of a sudden, introduced this new book that you wrote called Roar, I was actually not so surprised. But as I looked at it, read it, and thought about it, I started to step back and sort of berate myself for saying, why are we all going down this only younger path when clearly there's so much more opportunity personally as well as from a commercial standpoint? So after that long, hello, how are you? And how's life in the world? Tell us about how you came to actually write the book and create what I call the raw movement.
Yeah, thank you. I think the big headline is that this is probably the biggest social movement of our lives, in that the world, the developed world in particular, is going through a massive, massive shift in terms of living longer. We like to use that phrase as opposed to getting older, because if you're 50 and healthy, there's a very good chance you're going to live to be 90. So the whole life cycle of the second half of life is going to change dramatically for us personally, individually, but also for brands, companies, retailers, because this group is redefining their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond. And you're beginning to see that all over the popular press. It is a dramatically different time for the people in that cohort. And by the way, it affects everyone, regardless of race, gender, politics, religion, because everyone is going to be in this cohort. So I wanted to put a spotlight on not only that, but the people who are really at the forefront of redefining this cohort. I call them the reimagineers. And they are the people who are really very, very different than any generation that's ever lived on planet Earth. So we can start there. I would add that right now in the United States alone, 35% of the population is already 50 plus. The millennials
Yeah.
turn 50 in 7 years. They have a spending power of 8.3 trillion a year, which will grow to 13 trillion. They're not brand loyal. They're not interested in same old, same old. They're blowing up all of the stereotypes, and they're a force. They also, by the way, have all of the assets and all of the money. So they're a powerful cohort. I actually call them the new growth market for smart marketers and smart retailers.
Yeah. And the thing that strikes me about that, we, as you know, have been doing our How America Shops research for years. And it's not that we've been ignoring older millennials, Gen X, boomers, and beyond, but we've also seen within this, you've got this sort of, as you say, this sort of new cohort, but the influence. So we've got people who are caregivers, the other word of the moment. And so they could be millennials caring for older parents, friends, whatever that is. And so understanding this group, and caregiving doesn't mean that people have to be suffering from chronic disease. It could be just economic issues or other issues. And so I just see the sort of the implications of this as being really dramatic. So that's the other reason why this all this work you've been doing really intrigued me. Now, you went off and did some primary research as part of all this. Tell us what that revealed.
Well, what we saw, and we actually have another big piece of research in the field now, but what we saw is that many brands and marketers and retailers have always said, yes, we know about this cohort. We know it's coming. We know that there's going to be a bulge in the population. But first of all, we discovered, it's here right now. We're living in it. We're in the moment of it. The second thing that we saw, which was really eye-opening, is how individuals are rejecting brands and retailers that where they don't feel they represent them accurately in representation. We did some work with a group called Civic Science, which is an opinion analytics platform that you might be familiar with. And 60% of people over 55 said they don't see themselves represented in brand communications. 46% said they are likely to decide against purchasing a product, service, or go to a retailer who doesn't represent them accurately. And actually 33% have actually done that. So I think the big thing here is that if you're not, accurately presenting in a contemporary way, or communicating in a contemporary way, you're going to lose that customer. And so, while of course we have to cultivate Gen Z and younger generations, but meanwhile, on the other side of the spectrum, you don't want to lose that customer, and in fact, you want that customer to come in as a new customer. So, lots of work that has been done to show that the attitudes are dramatically different than they were in the past generation.
Yeah. And the other thing that strikes me about that, I am one of this generation you're talking about, as I know you are. And part of it is, I stream, most of the content I watch, but I do watch, heaven forbid, usually the evening news at 6:30 at night it's my way of stopping and having a glass of wine, right, from the workday. What strikes me about that when you talk about representation is I look at all the ads that run, and either they're all the medical ads or they're maybe phone ads or something, and everybody, while active, I look at them and I think, is that really how I want to be represented? So there feels like there's a lot of nuance to all of this as we think about roaring forward.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great observation. I sometimes say that the television commercials on the news are more depressing than the news itself. Because of that representation. But here's
hard to be, right?
Right. But here's the conundrum, which is going to be turned on its head. In the media matrix, where marketers buy advertising, they generally stop at age 54. And what happens if they want to target people over 54, they tend to buy things like the evening news and syndication, and then they feed off of the stereotype. And so what has to happen is the media buying industrial complex, first of all, has to be blown up, because we all know the 55 to 75-year-olds who are dynamic, digitally savvy, fit, all of the things that are contemporary. They don't see themselves at all, and they're not even being bought from a media standpoint, let alone being placed in creative executions. So it's a very big agenda item, and the people will force the issue ultimately.
Yeah. So that whole notion now, as we think about this, is it also feels like this is sort of either lack of knowledge or awareness, but also this discomfort. I don't know. I can't figure it out myself. And you're so close to that. How do these companies have to think about this? Both brands and media and retailers have to realign their thinking.
Yeah, well, first of all, you're absolutely right. They have to realign their thinking. Part of the dilemma is that many people who are around the creative table, the world has done a wonderful job of creating diversity around the table, but the world has done a horrible job of creating 50 plus as part of the diversity around the table. So what happens is a 25-year-old who's creating advertising sort of defaults to a stereotype. It's kind of like how when women were not represented around the table, there were a bunch of white men who decided what women really thought. So it's an inauthentic representation because the default is to stereotype. So integrating people of all ages, including 50 plus, is a really important part of getting an authentic representation. And that goes the same with marketing and strategy and building, merchandising approaches and so forth. So, the one thing that's happening, which is really interesting, is for the first time in history, you're going to have 5 generations of people in the workplace. And getting input from all the various generations is the secret sauce for what will be successful brands, marketers, and retailers moving forward.
So it feels like in some ways, Michael, that companies are beginning to get it. I've been watching all this conversation around menopause, lots of new brands in that space, retailers beginning to try to figure out how to talk to and merchandise and market to women through menopause, which actually can begin quite early. So it's not only 50 plus. I was remarked, we had a guest on the show, I don't know, a couple of months ago, Dr. Somi Javed, and she talked about how women would live, I think, like 40% of their life in menopause. And I was like, oh my God, poke my eye out. But that at least feels like there's some momentum around it, and people like Naomi Watts and others who are now in this space. Is that a good sign? Is that we're recognizing this opportunity, at least in one category?
Yeah, it's actually a very good sign. I think the more voices around the topic, the better. I'm on the board of the Stanford University Center on Longevity, which has a lot of interesting voices. There's a great piece called The New Map of Life, which they've created, which I think has been very helpful for brands. As you know, our team launched Oprah Winfrey's magazine, and Oprah on OprahDaily.com is now, just last week, had a longevity day and a longevity curriculum. I wrote 2 pieces for her in that for that space. We had Dr. Attia, who wrote the book Outlive, which you might be familiar with. Tamsin Fadal from a New York broadcaster is taking on the menopause topic. I think the more voices, the better. But here's what's great. I think that the people who represent the new cohort are great voices. So, we think about, Jennifer Lopez is in her 50s. We think about the Sex and the City women who, in the Golden Girls, they were in their 50s. So just think about the difference. So you need contemporary images of people who are voicing. Yeah. So, the old expression, you can't be what you can't see. These voices and these contemporary images are the ones that are putting a new spotlight on what the new 50, 60, 70 plus looks like, and that's great. I think the more the better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as you think about this in other industries, I mean, I mentioned before, health, obviously, financial services, technology, travel, those areas, beauty, to some degree, we still struggle with that a bit. But are there less obvious areas where you're beginning to see the change reflected?
Yeah, I think the categories that you mentioned are moving along. I think travel's done a really great job, the travel category. I'm going to go right to the flip side and say that fashion, high-end luxury, retail gets an F, because
Yeah.
generally the representation of anyone in their advertising who is over 30, forget over 40, is hard to find. We did a look see at 25 fashion luxury brands advertising campaigns, and only one in 25 campaigns had anyone over 30, maybe over 27, 28 in their campaign. And that was Dolce and Gabbana with Sharon Stone, who is 64 and is a great representation of what the new 64 looks like. And I think some of the research we found is that women who are 50 or 60 who have the means and the style quotient, they're all saying, we don't want to look like a 25-year-old. We want to look like a great 50-year-old. We want to be the best 60-year-old we can be. Where am I represented? Where's my representation? And some of the beauty companies like L'Oreal have done a really great job of that with their Women of Worth campaign, which you're familiar with, all the way from Helen Mirren to Viola Davis to, many others who are dynamic, incredible women who represent the new 50, the new 60, and all of that. So we also have to stop saying that, 60 is the new 40 and start saying that 60 is the new 60, and this is what it looks like. So,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
fashion, retail, luxury in general are really way behind the curve. And
Yeah.
looking at some of the other categories that you mentioned, travel in particular, there's a company called Caddis, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Caddis. I think they are really a next gen brand. They're an eyewear company. They call themselves Eye Appliances, and go spend some time on their site. They really have captured it. To me, Tim Parr, who's the entrepreneur founder, has nailed it with this brand, and so he's next gen for sure. He's next gen for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think the point you just made that it's not saying 60 is the new 40 because who cares, right? And that's a very different voice to it. Is it just women that where the issue is, or is it men as well?
No, it's been too. Although men tend to get a bit of a break. You know, Harrison Ford has a new movie coming out. He's 80. And
Right.
there's been a lot of great stories about him and how he works. There aren't as many female actresses who are 80 who are working in roles as much as
Mhm.
men have. So men, in roles tend to get more roles, tend to get better roles, diversified roles. Helen Mirren and Judi Dench are two examples of women who have broken that code. But many
Yeah.
other women, you tend to see roles that are more traditional. Homemakers, grandmothers, doting grandmothers. Like
Yeah.
where are the badass women? Like Helen Mirren playing an assassin. We need to see that. Right? So men get a little bit of a break, and we need more women to be represented in diverse roles. It's changing, and you're seeing more.
Or they marry very young women and have new babies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a great new studio in Los Angeles called Landline, and they're only producing films for romantic comedies for people over 50 with actors and actresses over 50. And it's a great niche that they have developed. So I think we're going to see
Yeah.
more of it.
Yeah. And it's not that I'll speak, mother-in-law study of one, that we don't want to see younger things or younger people
Right.
or learn new things or all of that. I think we learned that during COVID, right? And one of our dear friends and colleagues who used to runs CVS, and then Hudson Bay Company talked about Helena Folks talked about her dad, who at the point was 80 and had to learn to shop online. And now, of course, COVID over, fortunately, he's safe and well and continues to shop online. So it's not that it's one or the other. It's just being I think you made the very good point about represented around the table. If we think about gender, if we think about diversity, still in some industries a long way to come, but at least there's representation with the people who are either creating imagery, making decisions, developing new products, all of those things that make a big difference in having this full view of what comes next or what the rest looks like. So, I mean, I didn't tell the whole story that you've just come down from marathons in the Himalayas, and that you are also a noted photographer and writer of amazing travel books. So you have a very multifaceted life and have always. So as we mere mortals move on, what do you think we'll be seeing in this mere mortal space as we think about, as brands and retailers, opportunities of who we're trying to bring into this, not bring into the fold, but represent in this fold? Are they going to be like you, climbing mountains and jumping out of planes and flying?
Thank you. I think this Reimagine Your cohort are the front runners. This is like, I make the analogy that in every social movement, there are always people on the front line and the leaders, whether it was the women's movement or the civil rights movement or the LGBTQ movement. There are always people who lead the charge on redefining perceptions, redefining roles, redefining the representation of them in mainstream media and advertising, all of the above. So I think you're already seeing this massive shift of people who are redefining the script. They, are not necessarily retiring, they're working longer, or they're rewiring, as we like to say in the book, to new careers in their 50s or 60. They are going back to school. They are running marathons. They are competing in masters sports. Their imagery is going to change the perceptions of what this group looks like. You're seeing it play out a lot in in social media with the grandfluentials, which you're probably familiar with. There's a group in London called the Queenagers who own their age and have images of them. You're certainly familiar with Coastal Grandmother. You're seeing it, in social media, but you're not seeing it in mainstream advertising, marketing, imagery, merchandising, all of the above. And I would argue that the people will force the change the way women forced the change on the culture and brands and other social movements did as well. It's all coming like a freight train. So retailers who are not aware of this are going to be, having some real challenges.
Well, you led me right there. I was going to say, you gave retail in its broader sense, I assume, an F. How do you think retailers, whether it's, mass or big boxes, whether it's specialty, luxury, department stores, e-commerce, whatever, in the breadth of all the things that we cover, anywhere people shop, what are the things that they need to be thinking about here? Is it product? Is it imagery? Is it design of store? What does it mean? What should they be looking at so they move up from a horrible F?
I think it's all of the above. I'll give you an example. In the automotive industry, what's happening is, the average age of the car buyer in America today is 60. And the number of drivers who are on the road are, considerably aging and getting older. And so the design of automotive products, both the software and the hardware, are changing dramatically. Things as simple as push buttons and where the levers are in terms of opening doors, where your seatbelts are, all of this is being done by the engineers. I would argue that while that's the lean in, it helps everyone. It helps everyone of all ages, people who may have disabilities, people who may have problems. So being age agnostic is important. having representation of people that are contemporary versions of them, not some, the husband and wife walking into the sunset or petting the cat or playing with the grandchild. How about mountain biking,
Right.
or doing something that is, sort of a different kind of representation? And of course, also,
Yeah.
the way a store is merchandised to reflect that, in terms of not segregating people out based on age. And a lot of the drugstore chains, when they're focusing on that cohort, it's all about medical and health. Well, there are consumers who are buying lots of other
Right.
things in their stores, so they should be integrated into those messages as well. So those are just sort of a few examples of what they can do.
Yeah. It's really helpful. You remind me, there's a great retailer in the UK, in London, actually, John Bell and Croydon, which is a drugstore pharmacy retailer. And one of the things that's so interesting about what they've done, even in their durable medical equipment, which even the name by itself is so depressing, but in that they have, defined their walking sticks and canes by, want a sexy walk, want a whatever. It doesn't matter how old you are or young you are. They just, the verbiage, the commentary, the story they're telling is so much more fun as opposed to durable medical equipment, whatever that
example.
means.
Yeah.
So all of that feels like, everybody's included.
I think that the markets that America can look to, Japan is doing a great job. As you know, they're the oldest country on earth in terms of the percentage of people age-wise. Singapore is doing an interesting job on it as well. So there are places where people can look for inspiration in terms of just positioning. Even China is doing some interesting things with an aging population. So this is a phenomenon that is, as I mentioned earlier, all over the developed world. And so this is only going to get more and more enhanced over the next years and decades.
Yeah. No, this is really, it's inspiring because, as you said, the generations that we're talking about are now here. I love the idea that it's not 60 is the new 40, which makes me really annoyed and makes my red hair even fierier. So I think that's definitely part of it. You by yourself are a great inspiration of all things when I follow you on Instagram. It's interesting you said that about social media too, because I think about if traditional media does not reflect this, that pushes people more and more to the social media that does reflect who they are, or the communities that they can be part of, which is really interesting. But you've also done something else, so I must learn a little bit more about this before we wrap up. You've also built this subscription service that it's actually in real life as we speak. Tell me a little bit more about that, because anybody who's in this cohort or supporting those might be interested.
Well, thank you. We have a variety of activities that we've launched in our joint venture, which is really to put a spotlight on this new longevity. ROARforward.com lays it all out. But the one thing we really want to do is bring information and intelligence to the C-suite, to people to really get a good understanding of how this is going to affect their worlds, their business, their employees, their brands, all the above. So we have something called the ROAR Report, which is a quarterly and then has a supplement of ROAR bulletins, which come out every 2 weeks. And it's designed to really give the C-suite intel on this topic. We have a group called the ROAR Mastermind, which is a community group, and we have a series of events, and we'll have a summit in New York in November. I hope you'll come on November 9th, called the ROAR Forward Summit. And other kinds of activities. We also have a free newsletter, monthly newsletter, which people can sign up for. So we want to be one of the voices in the space, along with all the other voices that are joining in this chorus. So the Hearst was very excited about partnering up with ROAR in terms of this initiative. So thanks for letting me put in that little commercial message there.
No, the other thing that struck me about that is it's also, there's so much information, rightly or wrongly, out there in so many places about so many things. and the ability to have a play. For us, it's all about the shopper, and it's, as you know, but it's that notion of any way they want it, make it easy, and to have a trusted resource, I think becomes the other piece. But also, how do you present it to the people who need to reflect the change and see the opportunity? Because that's the other bit. We can all whine forever about inflation and getting younger shoppers and aren't they fickle and all of this stuff. But if we're not going to do anything about this, I will tell you as a last comment, at least from me, is that when my business partner, Candice Corlett, and I got together many years ago, after I'd already started the business, she had a consulting company that was all about baby boomers. And, the struggle to get enough big CPG companies and retail companies to pay attention. Now, granted, we're a long time since that, but it feels like, oh, my heavens. So I do feel like in the work you're doing, maybe we're getting the message. So I am delighted that you could come and talk about all this and inspire all of us. So if there's 1, 2, 3 things that we should be thinking about as we think about the future and the future of retail, what should we be thinking about here as we sort of call to action for all of those of us who are roaring forward?
The 50 plus market is huge and is going to get bigger and bigger. And it is not going away. It's with us for the rest of our lives as the population continues to live longer in that space. They're radically different. They're very different consumers. They are not brand loyal in any way, shape, or form. Think Tesla, think Apple Watch. We could go down the list of brands that have captured consumers away from traditional brands because of what they're offering. So looking at them in a new way, in a different way, in a fresh way. As one CEO of a major media company said to me, this is really the growth market of our lives if we play it right, because they have the money and the resources. So I think that's one. The second thing I would say is make sure you're representing them in a contemporary, modern way, because it not only is relevant for them, but it's for the next generation, because we want that 40-year-old to say, oh, that's what 60 can look like. That's what 70 can be. And be the role models that the next generations can follow, because they are the ones that are going to live the 100-year life. They are the ones that are going to have the long arc. Today's 5-year-old has a 50% chance to live to be 100. So it is going to be a radically different second half of life than what we have all known and we have all been wired for. Although those agitated baby boomers are really, busting that up because that's our new cause, right? We had sex and drugs and rock and roll, and now this is our new cause. How we're going to live longer and how we're going to.
Well, may there be more sex, drugs. Yeah, may there be more sex, drugs, and rock.
That would be there too. And you may have seen the piece. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the key, and I think smart brands, smart retailers are paying attention. By the way, they're also focused on Gen Z and the next generations, but don't forget the big cohort that's right in front of you.
Sure.
Yeah. So that would be my wrap.
Yeah. No, I think. Yeah, that's great guidance for us all. It's not that we don't want to talk to the younger people or focus on them, but there's so much commercial opportunity and joy in all of that. So I'm delighted that you could join us. Thank you. What's the next mountain you're climbing, literally or metaphorically?
Well, as you know, I just spent 9 days hiking to the Everest base camp and ran a marathon down. So, I like to say to people, this is what, the 60s look like. And so I'm going to take a little breather. Actually, Wendy, you'll find this interesting. I'm exploring a trip to Western Australia, to the Kimberley. So that might be the next trip. So I'll be calling you some advice. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Very good. Well done. Yeah. So Michael, do follow Michael on Instagram. It's just inspiring amongst other things. And do sign up. Doing a little plug here because there's so much else to see through Roar. So Michael, lovely to see you. Thank you for joining us on Future Shop. And I look forward to seeing you in November.
Thank you, Wendy. It's a great pleasure to be with you. Thanks, everyone.
So Michael said it all. First of all, those of you in the retail world, you get an F. Hear that again, F. clearly there is so much opportunity with this segment, this cohort, as he called it, of the population. It's not about looking backwards and making new frames of reference. 60 is the new 40, because that's just insulting. But it is about creating environments and products and experiences that are relevant, and it is about bringing the right group of people around the table to make these decisions. And that's where the opportunity lies, whether you're in the brand business, the CPG business, the fashion business, any kind of retail, any kind of consumer experience where you want people to spend money. It's not that we're saying ignore the younger shoppers. We are not for a minute. But we are saying there is a massive new older group of consumers and shoppers who are an opportunity waiting for us in the future of retail. Inspiration right there. So join us in the future. We'll see you soon. Cheers for now.